Type 1 is kindly co-sponsored by Ipsomed My Life Diabetes Care. Their My Life Ipso pump is super small and super light. It looks beautiful and focuses on keeping things simple with the help of the My Life app. Find out more on the My Life Diabetes Care website. Hi everyone and welcome to Type 1, a podcast that delves into the obscure, complex and challenging world of life with Type 1 diabetes. I'm Jen Greaves, and each week with the help of some brilliant guests, I'll be showing that there is no normal when it comes to handling this whopper of a chronic condition, because we're all pretty much figuring out the messiness of day-to-day life with diabetes as we go. And most of all, even though it doesn't always feel like it, we are absolutely not alone. My guest this week is Jade Byrne. Jade is an actor and comedian from Darlington and has lived with type 1 diabetes since she was 4 years old. In 2018, she took her play Pricks, which journeys her life dealing with over 70,000 medical pricks, to the Edinburgh Fringe, where it received critical acclaim. And this year, she's embarked on a UK tour with the play. Welcome along, Jade, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here.
I'm so happy you're here, and I can't wait to get chatting. So that was quite a brief introduction, and we'll get on to the play in a bit. But if you'd like to tell everyone a little bit more about Jade the human, for those that don't know you. That was a bit syllablack. What's your name? Where'd you come from?
So I'm Jade. I'm now 33. I'm from Darlington in the northeast of England, in the proper north of England, as I call it. I am an actress, and as you just said, everyone keeps saying I'm a comedian, and I'm like, that am I? But lots of people, since I brought Pricks out, are referring to me as a comedian. I'm thinking maybe I am funny, and I didn't know that.
You're very funny.
I'll have that. All right. But yeah, I'm an actress, theatre maker, and I've been type 1 diabetic for 29, almost 30 years. It's my 30th anniversary in November, as they call it. So, yeah.
So 4 years old is a very young age to be diagnosed with type 1. What do you remember about that time?
I remember not understanding what diabetes meant. It had di in the word, and that was quite scary. I remember being told that I couldn't eat chocolate whenever I wanted to eat it, which is different now. We know things have changed. We're talking 30 years ago almost. And I remember crying in my parents' car about that. I mean, I was 4, so it's difficult because you don't remember much from when you're that young. But I never forget hiding behind a bin in the hospital, though. And I literally did. So they would come and do my injections. In fact, that's probably the thing I remember the most, hiding. So the doctors and nurses would come into the room. I was in hospital for a few nights, and they'd come into the room to give me my injections or test my blood sugar, prick my finger. And I would hide from them. My mum and dad would play along. So I'd hide under the bed, I'd hide in the wardrobe. And my parents were obviously sat there smiling along, going, oh, we don't know where Jade is, and pointing at the wardrobe or under the bed or whatever. And they'd find me. But this one time I escaped from the room. And I don't know how my parents let me leave the room, but I ended up behind a bin in the medicine room on the ward. And I was only diddy. I was a diddy 4-year-old. And obviously I'd just been diagnosed with diabetes, so I'd lost a bit of weight anyway. And I was hid behind this little metal skinny bin for over 2 hours, whilst my parents and the doctors and nurses were walking past shouting, Jade, Jade. And I thought it was hilarious. And they were absolutely beside themselves, looking for me. And they really didn't have a clue where I was. I think I came out eventually. I think I got bored. But
hungry.
But yeah, that's probably my biggest memory from being diagnosed is hiding.
My gosh. And already that thing about the semantics of the word, I don't think I've ever considered that. It's got the word die in it. As a child, that's kind of how you interpret the world, right? In these
4 years old, yeah.
That's really interesting. And there's a sense there that you're already trying to escape it a little bit, I guess, or it's not that fun, to be in the hospital.
I mean, what 4-year-old wants to be stabbed with needles? Really?
Absolutely. Do you remember, your first injection? Were you injecting yourself at 4?
No, I started doing my own injections at 5. I don't remember my first injection. It doesn't stand out specifically. I remember getting injected in hospital because I didn't like it because I would hide. And my mum used to do my injections. I remember her injecting me in my arms, and like that, I hate it in my arms. Like that's just something I don't like, is my arms being stabbed at all. But I remember when, maybe I don't remember it, maybe I've just been told the story so many times that I feel like I remember it, but I remember going on a weekend away with the British Diabetes Association, as it was, which is now Diabetes UK. It was a family weekend away, and it was to learn a bit more about type 1 and meet other kids with type 1 and families. And all the kids there were all much older than me, and I walked into the hotel room after day 1, apparently with my hands on my hips, and I said, I'm doing my own injections from now on, you're not doing them anymore. My parents were like, oh, well, I don't know if that's really a good idea, you're only 5, Jade. And I was like, no, all the other boys and girls are doing it, so I'm doing my own, and that's that. And I did. From then on in, I did my own. And once I did my own injections and I was in control of putting the needle in my skin, I wasn't scared of them anymore. I think because I was in control, and I am a bit of a control freak, and I think a lot of type 1 diabetics are, but I think that made me not scared of having injections anymore, because it was me that was doing it to myself, not someone else.
Even at that young age. And how did your mum feel about not having to prick you anymore?
My mum, I only found out when I was doing workshops for when I was writing pricks. I did a workshop May 2018, just before I actually finished the last draft. And my mum came along to the workshop, and I only found out when I was doing that. She said that she was so relieved that day when I said, I'm doing my own injections from now on, because she said she hated injecting me. She felt like she was causing me pain. Other parents have said to me, but yeah, she was so relieved that she didn't have to do it anymore for me.
It must be so conflicting. I mean, I was 8 when I was diagnosed, so I did my own injections pretty much from day 1, but that is life-saving medicine. But you are, having to put something sharp into your child's body. I just cannot imagine what that's like.
And if we lived like 100 years ago, we'd just be dead. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. I mean, so many layers. So that kind of ownership, that sense of ownership that you took at 5, sounds like you were quite decisive from a young age.
It's funny, I can be quite decisive, but if you asked my husband, he'd be like, she's so indecisive. She can't make her mind up about anything. I think, if it's something I feel strongly about, then I am decisive.
So that autonomy or wanting to be in control, as you said, of your type 1 diabetes, did that mean that you were quite open with people at school and friends and boyfriends as you dated and things like that as you got a bit older?
Yeah, I always thought it was quite cool to be type 1 diabetic. I mean, like, no one else in my school was type 1 diabetic. I went to quite a small primary school, but like there was no one else there that was diabetic. Everyone used to whinge that I got to eat biscuits at like 10 o'clock, because back then that's how they managed diabetes. So I'd have a snack at 10 o'clock and I'd have a snack at like 2 o'clock while everyone else is sat doing their maths work or whatever. I'd be eating nice biscuits in the corner of the classroom. So I always thought it was pretty cool. I mean, I think I'm obviously quite an outgoing person, given the job that I've chosen to do and things like that. And I've always quite liked having the attention on me. I'm not going to lie. I'm not an attention seeker, but I do enjoy it when the attention's on me. So yeah, I always loved the fact I was type 1. It's a great conversation starter. I could talk for hours about it. Like, I just thought it was really cool. It makes me different. It makes me unique.
I have such a similar experience, and I always cringe to admit this, but thank you for leading the charge here. But mine was the same. I've got 2 brothers, so it's a noisy household. And once I got this, I was like, oh, I'm special, which is just ridiculous. And at school, I was the same. I got to eat biscuits to the point that someone told on me because I was troughing them in the cloakroom secretly, just trying to do it quickly. And this person in my class came in and he was like, I'm going to have to tell the teacher. And then at that point, she had to sit everyone down and sort of explain it. But then someone
I'd be
did
like,
say,
yeah, go on, tell the teacher.
yeah, go on, see what happens.
Dare
Someone then was like, oh, I wish I got to eat cookies in class. And I was like, you have no idea. But it is.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Oh.
I enjoyed the fact that they were jealous of me having to like eat the cookies, but at the same time, I was also like, yeah, you really don't want to have diabetes. Like people like when you have a hypo used to say to you at school, oh, I wish I got to, because back then it was always chocolate was what they told you to have, which is obviously not the best thing to have. They would always say, oh, I wish I got to have chocolate when I wasn't feeling well. You get to have chocolate all the time. Yeah, that's because my diabetes is out of control. Like I'm having a million hypos and I feel rubbish most of the time. So like you don't really wish that you had this, but I quite like the fact that you wish you were me a little bit.
Amazing. Oh, it's so funny. What about dating? Were you ever kind of shy about it?
No. There's one particular date, and it's in Pricks, actually. The story's not in Pricks, but the comment is in Pricks. So there's a scene in Pricks where I say, I'm type 1 diabetic, and then a stupid comment comes in, and I say it again, another stupid, and it's all the stupid comments that us type 1s regularly hear. Like, are you sure you should be eating that? Or does that mean you can't have cake then? Did you eat too much sugar when you're younger? And one of the comments is, oh, I don't mind. And that came from a date that I went on a lot of years ago. It must be like 14 years ago or something. It was a bit of a strange date anyway. It was a bit full on, and I was starting to run out of things to say. And I suddenly realised I hadn't told him I was type 1 diabetic, and I thought, oh, that's always a great conversation starter. I went, oh, by the way, I'm type 1 diabetic. I forgot to tell you. And he went, oh, I don't mind. And I was just like, I wasn't asking if you minded. I mean, what sort of answer is that? I wasn't asking for your permission to be diabetic. And yeah, so you can tell that date didn't really go anywhere.
Brilliant. So acting, at what age did you decide you wanted to act? And did your diabetes sort of factor into this career aspiration at all?
I always wanted to perform. I danced from being 3 years, but actually no, I was actually 2 when I first started ballet. I danced. I loved all performing arts. I loved going to the theatre. So I think it was always kind of something that I aspired to do. My dad was a drama teacher. My dad's very much into the arts. He's now an executive director of a theatre in the US, which isn't what he's done for the last kind of 30 odd years of his life, but he's now gone back to it. So I think it was in the blood a little bit as well. If you'd asked me when I was about 11, 12 years old what I wanted to be, my answer would be, I'm going to be a Bond girl. It's not I want to be a Bond girl, I'm going to be a Bond girl.
Love that.
I can confirm that I am not yet, and nor have I been asked to be a Bond girl. But if James Norton becomes the first type 1 James Bond, I better be the first type 1 Bond girl. That's all I'm saying. Just need to get myself in shape first.
Not at all.
Diabetes I've never seen it as a barrier at all. It's a hurdle, and it can be a bloody big hurdle at times, but it's never stopped me. And I think that comes from my mum. My mum, she was always fighting my corner, like, it will never stop you from doing anything. We can always work around it. But I never even thought it would be an issue. Never even until obviously when I've got older and I started acting, I see where it can cause issues, but there's always a fix.
Type 1 is a hurdle, not a barrier.
Yes.
What a takeaway. I love that. So have you got any sort of interesting stories of being on set as an actor with type 1 and obviously having to have hypo treats around? And
I have a secret drawer in Pricks with, I can't remember what's in it at the moment. It's usually apple juice, but I think it's got like tropical juice or something, little cartons in juice boxes in it at the moment. So I have a secret drawer in Pricks. Theatre's obviously the most challenging because you can't just stop and treat a hypo if you have one. TV isn't an issue because you stop starting, so it's fine. But theatre, yeah, I've done shows and I usually have, well, to be fair, I'd stopped using Lucozade as a hypo treatment and went to apple juice, but I've just started using it again in the last couple of weeks. I'm quite liking it, but I always had Lucozade or apple juice or something in the wings. With Pricks, it's a bit difficult because I'm on stage the entire time and there's only me on stage. So that's why I have a secret drawer. But also because adrenaline really kind of spikes your blood sugar, I don't tend to ever have a hypo on stage. I did have one once though, having said that. It was when I was doing a show called Apples. I was on a UK tour with Northern Stage Company and Company of Angels. But it was 2 parts, the show, and I think it was in the second act. So I think it was once the adrenaline had come down in the interval. No, it didn't have an interval. I'm telling lies. I'm telling complete lies. It didn't have an interval. No, it didn't. But it was later on in the show I realised that I thought, oh, you know, when your face starts, it's always different, but my face started to feel a bit funny and I was really hot. Well, obviously I'm under the lights, so it's difficult to tell. But I had I was in the wings. I had like 30 seconds in the wings, so I downed some Lucozade and then got back on stage again, kind of thing. But yeah, it's usually not an issue because adrenaline just makes it go sky high.
It's interesting you say that, because I do think the symptoms the ones I experience of a hypo are quite similar to when I get that big shot of adrenaline when I've done something scary or whatever.
Yes.
So how can you determine which is which?
Maybe I wasn't even having a hypo that time, actually, because I didn't have my blood tester on the side of the stage. I didn't have time to do, well, I probably did, but I didn't have time to test my blood at the time. Didn't have Dexcoms and Libras and stuff then. So maybe it might not have been a hypo. It could have been.
Precautionary, though.
I treated it anyway.
Probably the best.
I survived. It's fine.
The 2 options, treatment or fainting, you know, being a bit high is maybe a bit preferable. Did you, apart from the BDA weekend you mentioned, did you have many interactions with other type 1s as a child or a young adult?
No. In fact, the only interactions would be when I was going to my diabetes review appointment, and there'd usually be a couple of other kids there in the waiting room. And there was one kid, in fact, there was 2 kids about my age that I always remember. But there was one I'll never ever forget, because my mum didn't mince the words sometimes. She said what she was quite a quiet lady until she had something she really wanted to say. Like, if something wound her up, she wouldn't mince the words. She'd just say it. And we were sat in the waiting room, and this parent, this mum of this boy, was saying he was quite overweight, type 1 diabetic. And she's saying, oh, they keep going on about his weight, but what can he do? He can't exercise. He's type 1 diabetic. And my mum turned around and went, what? She went, Jade dances 4 times a week. Yes, you can exercise. That's a ridiculous thing to say. And I was like, go mum. And I'll never forget that. But really, no, I never had a friend that was type 1. I never had anyone else to talk to who understood until I've been older and I've gone out and I did the Daphne course, and that was actually, that wasn't the first time I got a chance to really talk with type 1s. Daphne stands for dose adjustment for normal eating, but if you ask anyone that's been on the Daphne course, it's just a week of therapy. No, it's a really good course, but I got to spend a week with 4 other type 1 diabetics and like actually realise that a lot of the things that I feel are normal. But prior to that, my first ever TV job, I was doing a guest lead role on Inspector George Gently for BBC One. And I got in the van to go, we were filming on location. So it's the first scene that I'd filmed. And I jumped in the minibus and I had a bag with me because I had my blood tester and my Lucozade and my injection and some snacks in the bag. And the girl who was I was playing her best friend, she turned to me, she went, oh, you brought a bag with you? I went, yeah. I said, I'm type 1 diabetic, so I just wanted to have like my emergency supplies and things in case I need them. She went, I'm type 1 diabetic too. And I was like, and then we got to spend 3 weeks filming together, and it was brilliant. Kate, she's a really great actress, actually. She's done loads of great stuff, Kate Bracken, since, but she's also type 1. And we spent like 3 weeks just making ourselves feel better about each other, kind of thing. And she then pulled out her I think it was dextrose tablets in a bra. She went, I've got my dextrose tablets here. And that was quite funny. But no, it wasn't till I was 20, how old was I when I filmed that? 25 or something? Yeah, so it wasn't till I was much older that I got a chance. Which is
quite a bit older since you were diagnosed, definitely. Yeah. Was that like an epiphany or some kind of light bulb when you start sharing these stories, realising that you hadn't done that as a child?
Yeah, I wish. You know what the epiphany was for me, actually? It wasn't that was like a wonderful experience, but it was when where I live, there's this group called Type 1 Kids, and they do they run groups around the northeast of England, and kids can come along, and it's usually on a Saturday or a Sunday, and it's once a month, and all these kids with type 1 diabetes and their siblings come along, and they just play games together, and they have fun, and the parents have a cuppa and they chat. And I went along to one of those because I was doing a fundraising event, and I wanted to find out a bit more about what they did. And it was when I was there, and I turned to Chloe, who runs it, and I just said, I so wish that I had this when I was younger. Like, to know that someone else understands what you're feeling, what you go through, like gets all of the ups and the downs, like the downs in particular. It would have been so helpful, but it didn't exist in my area when I was that age. But luckily, there are some wonderful type 1 diabetics in our world that are making this happen for other people now. And I think it's doing things like this, chatting to you, and working with charities like JDRF. It's all those things that kind of just make the world a better place for type 1s now. We've still got a lot of work to do, though.
Completely agree, but it's definitely progress. And this was before, social media, and I know that's not for everyone in terms of talking about your diabetes, but I did BDA weekends as well. So I met some people there, but it was this very intense 2 days, and then you sort of all disappeared again.
Yeah.
And I walked into a shop that I started working in, and there was only 6 or 7 staff. It was a really tiny shop, and one other girl my age had type 1. And that for me was just such an eye-opener. And both on injections, but both completely different approaches, outlooks, the way we interpreted, the way we felt about it. And it was then that I was like, oh, okay, so I'm only doing it my way, but that's not the only way.
Yeah. And I've come across so many ways that other people deal with it that kind of infuriate me.
Tell us some.
Oh, I just met someone recently, and sorry, I shouldn't say this because lots of type 1 diabetics, and it's not their fault, but she's still doing 4 injections a day, but she just doesn't test her blood sugar. I just thought, why are you doing that to yourself? Why do you not want to I was going to say prolong your life, but that sounds very morbid. Why do you not want to be in control of it instead of it controlling you, kind of thing? Why do you not want to feel well?
That's for me where it came to, because I definitely had that bit when I was sort of 18, 19. I didn't actively rebel, but I definitely was not engaged. And I just felt so bad every day, all the time, my mental health, my physical health. And I just got sick of feeling like that. And I think I totally get why it happens, because it's not something you chose, it's not something you can get rid of, and it follows you around like this heavy shadow.
And especially when you've got siblings like you do and I do that aren't diabetic, it's like, why me?
Yeah.
Why does it have to be me?
Yeah.
Why not them? How did they get away with it?
Yeah, get away with it, exactly. On that note, the play is, of course, about type 1 diabetes, but it's also very much a play about your family and your loved ones. Obviously, growing up, that was your parents, and now with your husband and your adopted girls as well. So was that a very conscious thing to include them in your story about life with type 1 as well?
Well, yeah, because I'm a family person. I still live in the town where I grew up. I'm a home bird. I could never imagine living far away from my mum, because it was like such a special relationship. I'm not going to cry. But I didn't want to be, sorry, I'm crying. I didn't want to be far away from my mum ever, because she was just so special to me. She kept me alive for all that time. And I remember saying when she was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, I said to her, Mum, you've kept me alive for 33 years. This is my time to keep. Sorry, I'm sobbing.
No, this
is my time to keep you alive. And that's probably what kind of hurt the most when she passed away, was the fact that I hadn't managed. She'd managed for 33 years. I know it's a very different illness and it's a very different condition. So, yeah, I think when I wrote Pricks, I didn't realise it until I'd written it, but a lot of it is a tribute to my mum and my family. And when I was writing it, it just was what naturally came out. It was just what I wanted to say. And parents of type 1s, I don't think they realise, especially when the kids are younger, enough how much respect their kids do have for them. I think they feel a lot of the time they're bothering their kids by like asking them if the blood sugar's all right, asking them this, like, have you done your injection, like working. And I feel like until their kids are adults and having to look after themselves, that's when they'll realise how much their kids respect them and how much they love them, when they have to do it for themselves, kind of thing. If you're diagnosed as a kid, that is, obviously. But the kind of parent side of things that are in the show, that came from doing workshops with parents through type 1 kids. And I hadn't realised until I did those workshops that it's as life-changing for the parents as it is for you yourself as a type 1. I'd always just thought about it quite selfishly from my point of view. And it wasn't till I did those workshops that I realised, actually, no, this is really scary for the parents.
I know you didn't write it as a tribute, but it is such a beautiful tribute to your mum and your family. And I completely agree in the sense that when I was diagnosed, I was in that age where you just think your parents know everything, have all the answers. If you're sad, they make you happy. Like, I'm saying that from a point of privilege, that my parents were that for me at that time. And what I realise now is that they didn't know what type 1 diabetes was either. They were plunged into it just as much as I was, and yet I was still viewing them in that way, that they would make it easier, make it better, or, know what to do when I had a hypo. But of course they didn't know, so stepping back and being able to see that as an adult, I think is quite powerful. I'm so happy to say that Dexcom UK and Ireland is the co-sponsor of Type 1on1. The Dexcom CGM system lets you see what your blood glucose is up to with just a quick glance at your compatible smart device, with predictive hypo alerts, customizable alarms, and a glucose reading up to every 5 minutes. Let Dexcom watch your blood glucose levels while you crack on with life. The Dexcom G6 starter kit is available for £159. Find out more at dexcom.com. Did your understanding of what it was like for your parents potentially change through the writing process?
Oh, yeah. A lot of things changed through the writing process. Writing it was very therapeutic, actually, really therapeutic. But yeah, my dad changed jobs because of my type 1 diabetes. And he was working for Xerox. He was a sales manager. He was one of the top salespeople in the country. But he was working away a lot and he was commuting. I think when we lived in York, and then we moved to Darlington, and then I think he was working in Leeds and Newcastle as well. I'm not really sure. I can't remember, but he was always and he would get home late, and he just felt he couldn't do that anymore, and he needed to be at home. So then he left Xerox and became self-employed as a management consultant. That's like a massive thing. He changed his career for me, and I don't think I've ever given him the kind of respect for him doing that. I still, to this day, even though I'm saying it now, I'd never said to him, I really respect you for doing that. And I had never really thought about it, although I always knew he changed his job because of me, because I've been told that before. I'd never thought about how much that is an upheaval, and that's a big deal to change your career. And for my mum as well, like, all of a sudden, your baby turns into a monster in the middle of the night. I literally did when I used to have nighttime hypos. I was possessed, and that's really scary. That's got to be terrifying for a parent. I remember I say in pricks, when I was 12, I started having hemiplegic migraines when I had hypos, and they only lasted until I was 14. But the first time I ever had one, you go completely numb down one side of your body. My mum thought I was having a stroke. Oh, she was beside herself. I know now, looking back on it, that she was beside herself when I see, but she was also really calm as well. Getting Lucozade down my neck. She said, I'm sure the feeling will come back. She was rubbing my hand, trying to get the feeling back in my hand and my arm and my leg and everything. But my arm was like moving around my head. It was so bizarre. Like, it had a life of its own. But yeah, like, I appreciate how scary things were much more now because I've written pricks, and I probably wouldn't have ever realised all of that if I hadn't written the show.
That's powerful on a very personal level. But I also think it's amazing that you have taken those experiences, you're putting them out there in the world. a lot of the time, naturally, we have these conversations about life with type 1 diabetes with other people with type 1 diabetes or those that are directly impacted. But you really are taking this out there to people who don't have any awareness of what being a monster in the night. Was that your motivation?
Yeah, it was the whole point. For my first funding application, the line was, I want to educate people through entertainment. And it had a whole section in it about the press and how the press mainly covers type 2 diabetes, but they just refer to it as diabetes. There's lots of misconceptions, misunderstandings, and misdiagnoses as well by GPs and things. So I was like, I want to take the miss out of all of these terms. And yeah, the whole point was I want as many people as possible to see it because I want to educate as many people as possible, because if us type 1s don't educate people about it, there aren't really any other people that are going to do it. We've got great people in the diabetes world like Partha Carr and Catherine Peters and people like that, but I think we need to take responsibility ourselves to tell people what it's really like and explain it, because otherwise, why would they know? It's not out there for people to see already, so we need to take it out there to them.
What an amazing motivation. Also, I think it's incredible for you to be aware of it to the point that you've put this out there and gone through this personal, difficult process to put this play on, which is just fantastic. What has the reaction been like from those that aren't type 1?
Oh, you know what? I love everyone, but they are my favourite reactions, the reactions from the people that aren't type 1 or have no relationship with type 1 whatsoever. I had 2 blokes in Edinburgh come up to me in the courtyard after the show. I was performing at Pleasance Courtyard, and I was always come up and just get a drink after the show, and like just in case anyone wants to talk to me, because I love talking to people. And these 2 blokes came over to me. They didn't know each other, both with their other halves, and they said to us, "That was incredible." They were both emotional. They were both crying. They went, "You brought the one." I can't remember which one said what, but like, "You brought us to tears," kind of thing. We've not met each other before. He said, "We've just watched your show." And one of them said one of them was type 1 and one of them wasn't. They said it just hit us, and we just started chatting after the show, and they'd had a pint together, and yeah, that was great. That there was a couple there that had no relationship with type 1, and they made friends who were type 1 diabetic through it, and the men cried. I feel like a woman when men cry. I know that sounds ridiculous and totally sexist, but when I get men to cry, then I feel like, oh, I'm doing something right here. It's hitting you. I make them laugh too, though. It is funny, but it's heartwarming in a little bit of a heartbreaking way, I think, sometimes, isn't it?
Is that what you set out to do? Backtracking a bit, how did the idea come about, and how did it morph? You know, you say it is heartbreaking as well as heartwarming, which it absolutely is, but is this what you set out to do at the beginning?
See, that quote, heartbreaking and heartwarming, has come from a review of Pricks, and a lot of the reviews say that. Heartwarming comes up a lot. I set out, when I got to theatre, I like to laugh, I like to cry, I like an emotional roller coaster. I don't like things that are too still. Yeah, my attention just wanders if I'm not visually like interested in what's happening. And so I wanted my piece of theatre. And at the time when I decided that I was going to make a piece of theatre, I didn't know what it was going to be about. At that point, I was like, I want to make something that makes people laugh, that every person just really enjoys, and I want to make them cry as well, because that's what I think theatre should be. I've seen a lot of shows through working in theatre and working with a company called Jabberwocky Market in Darlington, and some of them are fantastic, like absolutely blow you away, and some of them I just think, well, that's not written for the everyday person. That's written for a very niche audience of particular type of theatre goers. And I just think that's not my kind of theatre. But yeah, I wanted to make people laugh, wanted to make people cry. I wanted the type of theatre that I like. And I didn't know what I was going to write about. And I was sat in Edinburgh, I was at the Fringe, and I'd just seen a show. I think I'd just seen Hairpiece by Victoria Melody. And I find theatre really inspiring. It always gives me loads of ideas about what I want to do when I see a piece of theatre. So I was sat down writing loads of ideas. What could I write about? And I was having a glass of wine. And then I suddenly thought, oh, hang on. My blood sugar's not right here. And I tested my blood sugar, and I was having a hypo. It was about 2.7 or something. And I was like, so I was getting some hypo treatment out of my bag because I'm trying to tell you all that I'm a good diabetic and carry hypo treatment all the time, when in actual fact it's a total lie and I never have any on me, like right now. But no, I was having some hypo treatment. I think I got a swing from the bar, and I suddenly thought, oh my God, this is what I need to write about. I spend my life, as soon as someone asks me, if they see me test my blood sugar or do an injection or something, they ask me what I'm doing, or I talk to them for ages about what, I was like, I need to do this. I spend my life trying to educate people about it. That's what my piece needs to be about. I need to educate the world, but also entertain them at the same time, kind of thing.
And you mentioned you like seeing the emotional roller coaster, which on reflection is exactly what life with type 1 diabetes is. It's there for you almost, isn't it? Like the highs and the lows every day, in big ways and small ways.
Yes.
That's perfect play fodder, as you've discovered.
And I don't think I realised until I was writing the show how much diabetes affects mental health as well. I've always had suffered with depression and things like that, and I thought it was purely from the breakup of my parents' marriage. I thought that, but actually I realised while I was writing the show, no, a lot of my issues stem from being type 1 diabetic. I hate not being in control and things like that, and I think that's because I spent my life trying to control my blood sugars, that I think that somehow relates in some way to being out of control of other things. Like, no, I can manage this. I control it. I feel like I am a bit of a control freak. And I think that's down to being type 1 diabetic.
Was it ever discussed that there was a link possibly between your mental health and living with type 1 diabetes?
Never, ever. And still to this day, never, ever. Although I would probably more openly now say, I think this is because of my type 1 diabetes, because of writing the show and talking to people. It definitely does have a huge impact on your mental health, and I don't think that's appreciated enough in the medical world. And I think that doctors and nurses need to start really tuning into that and trying to help with that.
Yeah, and I think they are sort of waking up to it.
I think they are. I think we're on the dawn of a new kind of horizon with regards to mental health and type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, I'm hopeful about that. Mine was the same. It was an equation when I was diagnosed. You eat this, you take this. Well, we didn't even carb count back in 1996, but you have this food and you need this amount of insulin, and that's it. It's numbers. And it took me about 10 years to realise that insulin's a hormone, and this is a hormonal thing, and my feelings and my mental state will impact my blood sugars, and it just wasn't something that was ever spelled out to me.
And I think your blood sugars impact your mental state as well.
Completely agree. Well, we're putting it out there, and yeah, we're hopeful. 70,000 pricks is a lot of pricks.
Yeah.
Do you see any positives in what dealing with those pricks has brought to your life?
I think it makes me a really strong person. I think most type 1 diabetics you meet are really strong people. I think it makes me defiant, and it makes me me. I wouldn't be the person I am. I wouldn't set out to do the things I do and accomplish them if I wasn't type 1 diabetic, I don't think. I'd have as much fire in my belly. Yeah, type 1 diabetes is part of me. That makes me who I am.
I think that's a very empowering message. Do you see it as part of your life or sort of as a bystander to your life? What's the relationship between you, your life, and your diabetes?
I would say it's part of my life. Yeah, I would say it's part of my life because it's part of me. Yeah, definitely, it's part of my life. It's not going anywhere, so not yet anyway.
Okay, and temporary basils. What's your hope for pricks? Because, you sat there with a hypo and were inspired to write it. And now it's touring the UK.
Yeah.
And you'll have another tour coming in the spring.
What I really want to do, and what I've been talking about doing, is making a documentary of the tour. Tour, as I say, you say tour. I'm from the northeast, so we say tour up there. So I want to make a documentary of the tour to then hopefully be picked up by a TV channel or Netflix or something like that. I want it to be accessible to everyone. I don't think I can put pricks on film and do it justice. There are ways of making theatre brilliant on film, but I just think theatre's better to be experienced in real life. But I do think there's a way of doing a documentary that goes on tour, that covers my family life, covers lots of different things, like getting the set in to a venue, having to put my tent basil on so that I don't have a hypo whilst getting the set in. And then when I'm doing my show, my blood sugar's going sky high. It's like, it's so up and down, as we all know, as type 1s. But yeah, I just think it would be a really interesting documentary. And yeah, I want to get some other people involved. So that's my dream at the moment. And I also, another dream, which isn't really pricks related, is I think we need some sort of drama about type 1 diabetes on telly, and I really want to try and create that. I'm trying to get in touch with James Norton.
If you're listening.
I really want him to speak to me about it and be involved. I think we could make it happen. No, I don't think. We can make it happen.
Absolutely.
That's what we agreed to do. Yeah, we can make it happen.
Did you imagine such a reaction? Because type 1 diabetes affects a lot of us, but there's a lot of other, medical conditions and illnesses and things out there. But you're really touching people's hearts, and the community, and the response outside the community has been so huge. Did you think this many people would care about type 1?
No, I thought everyone would just be like, well, with regards to pricks, I was so nervous about writing pricks. I thought I might be really rubbish at writing, I don't know. And I just thought, yeah, I'm going to do it. And my dreams were exactly what's happening, which is amazing, and it's completely overwhelming. Yeah, I didn't ever anticipate people to be as interested in and as engaged in it as they are, and have so many other people with different conditions. Like you said, like I had a girl with Crohn's disease talk to me for a whole hour after the show about how much she related to it, even though it's a completely different thing. Anyone with any sort of chronic illness or autoimmune condition, things like that, I think can relate. And I think pretty much anyone who's completely fit and well can relate, because it's about family, it's about relationships, and it's about like a life-changing event for someone. So yeah, I think I'm overwhelmed with the response, but I'm really, really happy with it.
Totally deserved. Have you thought a bit about, obviously before when you were acting and stuff, you'd never done anything type 1 specific, and now this is really taking you onto a new phase. Is that a road you're going to continue down?
Yes.
Speaking about type 1 specifically?
Yes, definitely. I'm an ambassador for JDRF now. Apparently I'm a celebrity ambassador. I don't know what's celebrity about me now. But I'm an ambassador for JDRF. So yeah, that's absolutely my plan, to continue to talk about it. I'm also a Dexcom warrior as well. When I did this show, when I did Pricks at TAD Talks back in March, I went there and I said to my sister before I went, I said, I really want to become an ambassador for JDRF after this, and for Dexcom as well. And the next day, they both asked me, and I was just like over the moon. I rang my sister, so excited. So you're never going to guess what, because that's what I want to do. I want to talk about it. I want to tell people about it. I want people to understand it better than they do already.
That's amazing. We'll end on that note, because it's just such a wonderful ambition to have. Where can people find you online if they'd like to find more of your stuff?
I'm all over. The website is prickstheplay.co.uk. I like that because it rhymes. On Twitter, I'm Jade Byrne, BYRNE _actor. And then on Instagram and Facebook, it's Pricks Play.
And we've talked a lot about Pricks, but it's not too late for people who haven't seen it yet to come and watch, hey?
No, it's not. So we've got some shows coming up. So just check out the shows section on the website. We're in the middle of planning a big spring 2020 tour. And hopefully we can make the documentary on that tour. That's what I'm hoping.
Petition
so
for that.
You can definitely still see it.
Okay, Jade, you are straight talking, funny, sharp, and you are an incredible ambassador for all of us living with type 1. Thank you for putting your story out there, because I know you're helping people. You helped me. I laughed and cried my way through that play, and I think you're a brilliant, brilliant woman. Thank you so much for talking to me.
I get so embarrassed when people say lovely things like that.
100% true. I'm honoured that you're here, so thank you from the bottom of my heart.
I'm honoured to have been asked. Thank you.
hope you enjoyed this episode of Type 101. Please remember that nothing you hear on this podcast should be taken as medical advice. I'm definitely not a healthcare professional. If you like what you hear, hit subscribe and do leave a little review on iTunes if you have time. It really helps to spread the word about type 1 diabetes. You can find me at Miss Jen Greaves across all the platforms, and the podcast show notes live at missjengreaves.com. Thanks again to Dexcom UK and Ireland and Ipsomed My Life Diabetes Care for sponsoring this episode. And thank you so much for listening.